The Grand Galactic Council chamber hung suspended in space like a crystal snowflake, its transparent walls revealing the dance of stars beyond. Inside, Ambassador Marcus Rivera fought the urge to whistle at the impressive gathering of alien species. As humanity's first representative to the Council, he knew the importance of maintaining decorum, even as his inner child wanted to geek out at the sight of actual aliens. The Draconids dominated the chamber, their massive scaled forms towering over the other species. Their leader, Supreme Commander Tyraxus, fixed Rivera with all four of his golden eyes. So these are the humans who dare to expand beyond their solar system. His voice rumbled through the translation matrix, dripping with disdain. Rivera straightened his tie, a gesture that had become his nervous tic over years of diplomatic service. We prefer to think of it as exploring rather than daring, Supreme Commander. Humanity has always been curious about what lies beyond our horizons. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber as various species discussed this audacious statement. The Draconids had held dominion over 3 galactic sectors for millennia, their biological superiority unchallenged. Their scaled bodies could withstand the vacuum of space, their strength could crush titanium, and their technological advancement had made them the self-proclaimed apex species of known space. Curious. Tyraxus laughed, a sound like grinding stones. Your species still fights among themselves over primitive resources. You haven't even terraformed your nearest planetary neighbor. What makes you think you deserve a place among the stars? Rivera smiled, the kind of smile that had won him diplomatic victories on Earth. With all due respect, Supreme Commander, we're already among the stars. Our colonies on Mars and Europa are thriving, and our deep space expeditions have made contact with 15 different species, all of whom have welcomed peaceful trade relations. Peaceful trade. Tyraxus spat the words like they were poison. The galaxy isn't built on peace, human. It's built on strength. For 10,000 cycles, the Draconids have proven ourselves the strongest through the trial of dominance. If humanity wishes to expand further into space, you must prove yourselves worthy. The council chamber erupted in excited chatter. The trial of dominance was legendary, a series of challenges that tested the very limits of a species' capabilities. No one had challenged the Draconids in over 500 cycles, not since the cybernetically enhanced Macarians had tried and failed spectacularly. Ambassador Rivera maintained his diplomatic smile, but his eyes hardened. And if we refuse, then your species will be confined to your solar system, Tyraxus declared. Your ships will be turned back at every border, your trade agreements nullified, your colonies. He paused for effect, isolated. The threat hung in the air like a sword. Rivera knew what isolation would mean for the fledgling human colonies. They relied on trade with other species for crucial resources and technology. Being cut off would doom them to a slow death. The Council recognizes humanity's right to refuse the challenge, announced the arbitrator, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix. However, the consequences have been stated according to galactic law. Rivera pulled out his datapad, pretending to review information while actually sending a quick message back to Earth. The response came almost immediately, making him smile. Humanity had anticipated this possibility. The Draconids speak of strength, Rivera addressed the chamber, his voice carrying to every corner. But strength takes many forms. Humanity accepts the trial of dominance. Tyraxus's scales rippled with pleasure. You doom your species to humiliation, human. Our champion will. However, Rivera interrupted, causing several council members to gasp at the breach of protocol. We invoke the right of mutual challenge under Section 7 of the Council's Charter. The chamber fell silent. The right of mutual challenge was rarely invoked, but its implications were clear. If humanity won, they would gain equal status with the Draconids in the galactic hierarchy. Tyraxus's tail lashed in anger. You dare. We dare, Rivera replied calmly. After all, if you're so certain of your superiority, surely you have nothing to fear from a primitive species like ours. The trap was perfectly laid. To refuse now would show weakness, something the Draconid's pride would never allow. Tyraxus's scales darkened with rage, but he was bound by his own arrogance. "Very well," he growled. "The trial will begin in 3 solar cycles. Choose your champion wisely, human. They will face challenges that would break lesser species." As the council chamber erupted in excited discussion, Rivera sent another message to Earth. "Challenge accepted. Send in our secret weapon." Little did the Draconids know, humanity had been preparing for this moment ever since they first detected alien life. Their champion wasn't chosen for brute strength or advanced technology, but for something the aliens couldn't comprehend: humanity's ultimate weapon, adaptability. 3 solar cycles passed in a blur of diplomatic preparations and barely concealed tension. The grand arena of trials, carved into an asteroid in neutral space, gleamed under the light of twin stars. Representatives from 100 species packed the viewing galleries, eager to witness what many believed would be humanity's greatest humiliation. Commander Tyraxus stood in the center of the arena, his scaled armor catching the starlight. The Draconid champion, Krax, loomed beside him, nearly 12 feet of muscle and scales. Krax had won 37 personal combat trials across the galaxy, his regenerative abilities and natural armor making him nearly invincible. Ambassador Rivera entered the arena alongside a surprisingly average-looking human woman in a simple black jumpsuit. Captain Maya Patel stood 5'8", her athletic build unremarkable compared to the towering aliens around her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and she carried nothing but a small water bottle. "This is your champion." Tyraxus's laugh echoed through the arena. A single, unaugmented human. Maya took a sip from her water bottle, surveying the arena with quiet interest. "You know," she said conversationally, "I expected it to be bigger." The translation matrix carried her words to every species present. Several diplomatic observers quickly updated their reports. This human either possessed incredible confidence or spectacular foolishness. Rivera stepped forward. "Captain Patel holds the current Earth record for the pentathlon challenge. She's also a quantum physicist and has survived 3 first-contact scenarios that went less than optimally. Credentials that would impress primitive species," Krax rumbled, flexing his massive claws. "But meaningless here." The arbitrator's crystalline form descended from above. "The trial of dominance consists of 5 challenges: strength, endurance, intelligence, adaptation, and combat. Victory requires success in 3 challenges. The consequences of failure have been established." Maya stretched her shoulders. "Question: are we allowed to choose the order of the challenges?" "It is your right as the challenged party," the arbitrator confirmed. "Great. Let's start with strength." Maya's smile didn't waver as Krax stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over her. The first challenge took place in a gravity-controlled chamber. At its center stood a pillar of ultra-dense material, mined from the core of a neutron star. The goal was simple: move it. Krax demonstrated first. His muscles bulging, he wrapped his arms around the pillar and, with a roar that shook the chamber, lifted it 3 feet off the ground. The display of raw power sent murmurs of appreciation through the crowd. Maya walked around the pillar, studying it with scientific interest. "Fascinating density. Mind if I take some measurements first?" "Your delaying tactics won't," Krax began, but Maya was already pulling out what looked like an ancient smartphone. "Just checking something," she murmured, tapping on the screen. "The gravity controls in this chamber, they're standardized across the entire floor, right?" The arbitrator confirmed this was correct. "Perfect." Maya positioned herself at one end of the pillar. Instead of attempting to lift it, she placed her hands on its side and pushed. To everyone's shock, the pillar began to slide across the perfectly smooth floor. "What trickery is this?" Tyraxus demanded. "Physics," Maya replied cheerfully, continuing to push the pillar in a wide circle. "Your gravity controls create a consistent downward force, but they don't account for horizontal movement. With the right application of force, and the extremely low coefficient of friction on this lovely floor, moving this pillar is just a matter of overcoming inertia. She completed the circle, the pillar now having moved further than Cracks had managed to lift it. Also, you never specified how we had to move it. Lifting is actually quite inefficient when you think about it. The gallery erupted in a mixture of outrage and amazement. The Draconids argued that this violated the spirit of the challenge, but the arbitrator's ruling was clear. The pillar had been moved, and the method was within the established rules. "That's 1 point for humanity," Rivera announced, unable to hide his grin. Crax's scales darkened with rage. "This proves nothing. A simple trick doesn't demonstrate true strength." "No," Maya agreed, taking another sip from her water bottle. "But it does demonstrate something more important. The ability to understand and work with the rules of the universe, rather than trying to overpower them." She turned to the arbitrator. "Shall we move on to the endurance challenge?" As the arena reconfigured itself for the next trial, Rivera noticed something interesting. While most of the alien species still looked skeptical, a few were watching Maya with newfound curiosity. They had just witnessed something they hadn't expected. A demonstration that strength could mean more than raw power. Maya caught his eye and winked. The water bottle in her hand wasn't just for show. It was filled with a specially designed electrolyte solution. She had already calculated the exact amount of hydration she would need for each challenge. Because while the Draconids saw these trials as a test of superiority, humanity had long ago learned that victory often went not to the strongest, but to the best prepared. The endurance chamber resembled a massive geodesic sphere, its transparent panels revealing the void of space beyond. Inside, the environment could be altered to simulate the most extreme conditions found in the galaxy. The challenge was simple: survive. Participants must endure 6 environmental phases, the arbitrator announced. Each phase lasts 30 minutes. Movement between designated safe zones is required. Any attempt to remain in a single zone will result in disqualification. Maya studied the chamber's layout, while Cracks strutted confidently to his starting position. The Draconid's natural armor gleamed, specially treated for the trial ahead. Beginning environmental sequence in 3, 2, 1. The first phase hit like a hammer. The chamber filled with crushing pressure equivalent to the depths of a gas giant. Crax's powerful form barely seemed affected. His species evolved to withstand such conditions. Maya, however, had already activated her jumpsuit's reactive pressure system, a thin layer of programmable smart fabric that distributed the pressure evenly across her body. "Interesting solution," Rivera murmured from the observation deck. "But will it be enough?" The pressure phase gave way to extreme cold, temperatures dropping to near absolute zero. Crax's metabolism shifted, his scales darkening to absorb any available heat. Maya kept moving, her movements deliberate and controlled. The smart fabric adapted again, creating microscopic friction points that generated just enough heat to prevent freezing. "Your champion's suit," Tyraxis growled at Rivera. "It must contain illegal technology." "Actually," Rivera replied, "it's based on the same principle as penguin feathers. Nature already solved the problem of extreme cold on Earth. We just refined the solution." The third phase brought searing heat, hot enough to melt lead. Crax's natural cooling system kicked in, while Maya's suit began a controlled release of the excess heat it had stored during the cold phase. She was sweating heavily but still moving methodically between the required zones. "Remarkable efficiency," one of the alien observers noted. "The human is expending minimal energy while meeting all requirements." The fourth phase filled the chamber with caustic gas. Here, Crax finally showed signs of distress, his scales beginning to corrode. Maya pulled a small device from her pocket, what looked like a simple rebreather, but was actually a molecular filter of her own design. "That wasn't in the equipment check," Tyraxis protested. The arbitrator's response was immediate. "The rules allow for personal protective equipment that does not exceed the technological level of the participant species. The filter is approved." The fifth phase brought radiation levels that would kill most organic life forms instantly. Krax's natural resistance protected him, but he was visibly tiring from the consecutive environmental stresses. Maya's movements had become slower, more measured, but she remained focused. Her suit's radiation shielding, inspired by the tardigrade's extraordinary resilience, held firm. Final phase initiating, the arbitrator announced. The chamber filled with a shower of micrometeoroids, each particle moving at lethal velocities. Krax roared in pain as the particles peppered his scales, drawing blood despite his armor. Maya, however, had been waiting for this. She reached into another pocket and pulled out what looked like a handful of sand. With precise movements, she released it into the air around her. The particles began to glow, creating a weak but effective electromagnetic field that deflected the worst of the meteoroid shower. Iron filings, she explained between careful breaths. Magnetized by the chamber's own field generators. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. As the final seconds ticked down, both competitors remained standing. But while Krax was bleeding from numerous wounds, Maya looked merely exhausted. Both participants have completed the endurance trial, the arbitrator declared. However, the human competitor demonstrated superior efficiency and sustained less damage. The point goes to Earth. The gallery erupted in shocked discussion. 2 trials, 2 victories for humanity. No species had ever taken such a lead against the Draconids. Maya took a long drink from her water bottle, checking something on her smartphone. The intelligence trial is next, I believe. She glanced at Krax, who was still being treated for his injuries. Unless you'd like a break. The Draconid champion's roar of rage echoed through the chamber. Whatever humanity's champion had expected to face in the intelligence trial, she had just ensured it would be far more dangerous than originally planned. Rivera watched as Maya calibrated her equipment for the next challenge. He knew what the aliens didn't. Every piece of technology she carried was designed to serve multiple purposes. The water bottle contained not just electrolytes, but also emergency sealant. The smartphone was a supercomputer in disguise. Even her hair tie concealed a multi-tool. Because humans had learned long ago that survival didn't depend on being the strongest or the most resilient. It depended on being prepared for anything and everything. The intelligence trial arena transformed into a vast holographic maze, its walls shimmering with quantum equations and paradoxes. Unlike traditional mazes, this one existed in 11 dimensions, with paths that could only be navigated by solving increasingly complex theoretical problems. Maya stood at the entrance, her expression thoughtful as she studied the swirling equations. Krax, still nursing wounds from the endurance trial, sneered at her hesitation. Having second thoughts, human. These puzzles were designed by the greatest minds in the galaxy. Actually, Maya replied, pulling out her smartphone, I'm just appreciating the elegance of the base mathematics. Whoever designed this has a real flair for theoretical physics. The rules were explained. Reach the center of the maze by solving the quantum puzzles that blocked each path. Wrong answers would result in temporal displacement, sending the competitor back to their last correct solution. The first to reach the center would win the trial. As the challenge began, Krax charged forward, his enhanced mind processing the equations with practiced efficiency. The Draconids' reputation for intelligence wasn't unearned. They had developed faster than light travel centuries before discovering Earth. Maya took a different approach. Instead of immediately entering the maze, she spent several minutes studying the pattern of equations, occasionally making notes on her phone. Your champion seems reluctant to begin, Tyraxis observed mockingly. Rivera smiled. She's not reluctant. She's thinking. Inside the maze, Krax was making steady progress, solving equation after equation through brute mathematical force. But Maya, when she finally moved, didn't follow any of the obvious paths. Instead, she walked straight to what appeared to be a solid wall of quantum formulae. Invalid approach, the arbitrator began, but stopped as Maya raised her hand. According to Maze Rule 7, Subsection 3, she said. Solutions can be derived from any valid mathematical proof. I'd like to demonstrate something interesting about the maze's underlying structure. She held up her phone, displaying a complex series of calculations. The quantum equations aren't just puzzles. They're part of a larger pattern. The maze itself is a single, unified equation. The gallery watched in astonishment as Maya pressed her hand against the wall of numbers. Instead of being blocked, she passed through as the equations rearranged themselves around her. Impossible. Cracks roared from somewhere deep in the maze. Not impossible, Maya called back. Just a different way of looking at the problem. Instead of solving each equation individually, I solved for the maze's fundamental algorithm. Once you understand the pattern, you can move through it at will. She demonstrated by walking through another seemingly solid wall, taking a direct path toward the center while Cracks was still navigating the traditional routes. Tyraxis slammed his fist on the observation deck railing. This is another trick. The human is cheating. The arbitrator's crystalline form pulsed with interest. On the contrary, this approach demonstrates a higher understanding of quantum mathematics than the maze's designers anticipated. It is a valid solution. Maya reached the center of the maze just as Cracks was solving his 20th equation. She sat down cross-legged in the victory circle, taking another sip from her water bottle. That's 3 points for humanity, Rivera announced. According to the rules of the trial of dominance, we've won. But Tyraxis wasn't finished. His scales had darkened to an ominous shade, and his 4 eyes blazed with fury. The combat trial remains. By ancient law, it must be completed regardless of the overall score. Is that really necessary? Rivera asked, but Maya was already standing. It's fine, she said, checking her suit's systems. I expected this. What she didn't say, what only Rivera knew, was that everything so far had been preparation for this moment. Every piece of equipment she carried, every strategy she'd employed, had been building to the final confrontation. Because Maya had studied the Draconids extensively before the trials began, she knew their pride wouldn't allow them to accept defeat, even if it was official. The combat trial wasn't just the final challenge, it was inevitable. As the maze dissolved around them, Crax's massive form loomed over Maya. The wounds from the endurance trial had healed, thanks to his species' regenerative abilities. His scales rippled with barely contained rage. No more tricks, he growled. No more clever solutions. Just you and me, human. Maya rolled her shoulders, settling into a ready stance. You know, she said conversationally, there's something I've been wanting to tell you about Earth's gravity. The gallery tensed as the combat trial began, many species already calculating the odds of human survival. They were about to learn another important lesson about humanity. Sometimes the best tricks are the ones you save for last. The combat arena manifested as a vast, circular platform suspended in space, its surface a mosaic of different terrains, from smooth metal to rugged rock. The artificial gravity could be altered at will, creating zones of varying weight and pressure. Crax stood ready, his massive form practically vibrating with anticipation. His natural weapons, razor-sharp claws, armored scales, and a tail that could shatter concrete, made him a living weapon. Maya looked tiny in comparison, still in her simple black jumpsuit, that ever-present water bottle clipped to her belt. The combat trial has no time limit, the arbitrator announced. Victory is achieved through surrender or incapacitation. Lethal force is. There was a slight pause. Discourage. Maya raised her hand. Question about Earth's gravity that I mentioned earlier. We evolved under constant gravitational pressure, right? About 9.8 meters per second squared. Your planet's weak gravity is well known. Crax sneered. It's why your species is so soft. Interesting perspective, Maya replied. But here's the thing about constant pressure. It builds resistance. She unclipped her water bottle and emptied its remaining contents onto the floor. For instance, every human on Earth is constantly fighting against nearly 10 kilograms of atmospheric pressure per square centimeter, every second of every day. The combat trial began. Krax launched himself forward with devastating speed, his claws aimed at Maya's midsection. She didn't try to match his strength or speed. Instead, she moved like water, redirecting his momentum and letting him crash past her. Your species evolved in short bursts of activity, Maya continued, almost conversationally, as she ducked under another attack. Ambush predators, right? Lots of power, but limited endurance. Krax's tail whipped around, fast enough to break the sound barrier. Maya dropped and rolled, using the varying terrain to her advantage. Humans, on the other hand, evolved as persistence hunters. We're not the fastest or the strongest, but we can keep going long after other species have exhausted themselves. The gallery watched in fascination as the battle unfolded. Krax's attacks were devastating, but increasingly frustrated as Maya seemed to flow around them, never quite where his strikes landed. She was utilizing every aspect of the arena, the different terrains, the gravity variations, even the momentum of Krax's own attacks. Stand and fight. Krax roared, his regenerative abilities already working overtime to maintain his energy levels. That's another interesting thing about Earth, Maya replied, still moving, still talking as if giving a lecture. We have this concept called fighting smarter, not harder. Why exhaust yourself when you can let your opponent do the work? Rivera noticed something from the observation deck. Maya wasn't just avoiding Krax's attacks. She was systematically leading him through the various gravity zones, forcing him to constantly adjust his mass and energy output. The water bottle, he suddenly realized. She's been measuring gravity fluctuations since the trials began. Krax's movements were becoming less coordinated, his massive form struggling to adapt to the rapid gravitational changes. Maya had mapped the arena's gravity patterns and was using them like a weapon, letting physics do what brute force couldn't. You're not even fighting, Krax accused, his strikes becoming desperate. I'm fighting exactly how humans fight, Maya corrected. We observe, we adapt, and we use everything available to us, including. She pressed something on her smartphone, previously recorded gravitational data. The arena's gravity control system suddenly pulsed, recreating the crushing pressure from the endurance trial, but only in specific zones that Maya had carefully mapped. Krax, already exhausted from his continuous attacks and the constant gravitational shifts, staggered as the pressure hit him. This is why we survived on Earth, Maya explained, finally moving to attack. Her strikes were precise, targeting pressure points she'd observed during Krax's previous regenerations. Not because we were the strongest, but because we learned to understand and use the forces that try to kill us. The end came not with a dramatic knockout, but with simple physics. Krax, caught between zones of high and low gravity, his regenerative abilities overtaxed, his energy depleted, finally collapsed. Maya stood over him, still in her basic jumpsuit, barely breathing hard. "Do you yield?" she asked quietly. Krax's response was a growl of defeat. The arbitrator's voice rang out. "The combat trial is concluded. Humanity's champion is victorious." The gallery erupted in chaos. No species had ever defeated the Draconids so thoroughly, let alone using such unorthodox methods. Tyraxis stood rigid, his scales almost black with suppressed rage. "According to the terms of the Trial of Dominance," Rivera announced, "humanity has earned equal status with the Draconids. Our expansion through space will continue, and we look forward to peaceful cooperation with all species." Maya helped Krax to his feet, a gesture that confused many of the watching aliens. "Your regenerative abilities are remarkable," she said. "I'd love to discuss them sometime. There might be medical applications that could benefit both our species." Later, as the Galactic diplomats began drafting new treaties, Rivera found Maya in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "You know they're already calling this the end of the Draconid supremacy," he said. Maya shook her head. "No, it's the beginning of something better. We proved we could win, yes, But more importantly, we proved we could win without destroying our opponents. That's the real human strength. We don't just survive. We try to make things better. She held up her smartphone, showing a complex diagram. Besides, I've got some ideas about combining Draconid regeneration with our gravity resistance technology. Think of the possibilities for deep space exploration. Rivera laughed. Even in victory, humans were already looking for the next horizon, the next challenge to overcome. Because that, more than any trial or combat, was what truly made humanity unique in the galaxy. The endless desire to learn, to improve, and to reach for the stars. Not as conquerors, but as explorers. Not as supreme beings, but as part of a vast, complex universe full of possibilities. And maybe that was the greatest victory of all.